Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. You're watching our flagship weekly show, Talking Point. With me, my colleague Parul Chandra. We're talking to Sushant Sareen from the Observer Research Foundation. And obviously, we're looking at the recent moves to give a jail sentence to the Lashkar chief Hafiz Saeed. As you're aware, the FATF, Financial Action Task Force, is meeting in Paris next week. Sushant, what can we expect from the FATF meeting?
Well, the grapevine is that the Pakistanis are unlikely to come out of the grey list just yet. In any case, if they have to come out of the grey list, that won't be before October. This is the plenary meeting that will, prepare the ground for whatever is to happen in October. But the grapevine, like I said, is that they are unlikely to come out of the grey list. They are even more unlikely to go on the blacklist. So that's where things are going to stay. And in a sense, for the Pakistanis, grey is the new white, at least for the foreseeable future. And they are going to be really very happy if they continue to stay on the grey list, particularly because the last FATF meeting last year in October was quite scathing on Pakistan. And they had given them until February, this particular meeting, to clean up their act. Otherwise, they had threatened them with certain consequences. So that was kind of scary for the Pakistanis, more so because some of those threats had come in a press conference which was given by the FATF chief, who's a Chinese. And for the Pakistanis, the Chinese are iron brothers and all of that. And this took them a bit by surprise because they thought they'll have an easy ride with the Chinese as president of FATF. But that didn't happen the last time around. Whether that was a smokescreen, and the Chinese are famous for this kind of a thing, that is uncertain. But they were told that they had to clean up their act. So I think a lot of the stuff which we have seen over the last 3-4 months, culminating in the conviction of Hafiz Saeed, is with an eye to the FATF plenary meeting, which is next week.
Sushant, you just said that it's unlikely that Pakistan will be downgraded to the blacklist. Now, India has been trying very hard to actually get them pushed into the blacklist. If this doesn't happen, what does this mean for India's own efforts into, seeing Pakistan as a state that promotes or backs terror?
See, everybody sees Pakistan as a state that promotes and backs terror, except for maybe the Chinese and third-rate countries like Turkey and Malaysia. But other than that, virtually the entire world, you carry a Pakistani passport and you go to any country and look at the way you are treated. That in itself tells you what the reputation of Pakistan is. But beyond that, look, if the FATF decisions were to be taken purely on objective criteria, which the FATF has listed out, there is no way that Pakistan will not be put into the blacklist. But while the criteria are all objective, the decision making is also political. And nobody really wants to push Pakistan into the blacklist just yet. It is better to keep the sword dangling over the head, keep them, delivering on certain things, keep them on the tenterhooks, incentivize them by not throwing them into the blacklist, and keep getting your work done. So that's a political thing. And that political thing is something which, the big powers like the US and some of the European countries also, which have brought Pakistan into the grey list, will also want to do. So I think if you look at the politics of it, putting them into the blacklist is not going to happen. Now, should India have a problem with that? Yes and no. It should have a problem because it's always nice to see your enemy country go down the tube. And it shouldn't have a problem because the kind of things that the Pakistanis are being forced to do actually work well for us also. So, on balance, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag.
But how really genuine are their attempts to crack down on terror outfits?
Totally insincere.
Yes. So
totally
then how do you balance it out? On the one hand, you said that, well, it's good to keep a sword dangling on the head. But on the other hand, you have a Hafiz Saeed. He's been convicted. It's the fastest trial. Say in 2 months, they've sentenced him to 11.5 years in prison. But for all you know, he might be out in the next few months.
Yeah, so I'll just come to the Hafiz Saeed part later, but
Yeah.
I think on the larger question which you're asking, it's a very valid question. See, the way I look at it is this. We have been fighting this Pakistani terrorism, for the last 40 years. I go back to Punjab, and actually you can say 70 years, because, we have notoriously short memories in India. We forget that the first jihad started in 47, 48 in Kashmir. We forget what the Pakistanis did in the northeast, when East Pakistan or Bangladesh was still a part of Pakistan. So we forget all of that. But let's talk about the last 40 years, starting Punjab. We have been pushing relentlessly to curb Pakistani activities. We have also increased our own capacities. Now, they cannot be, and there is not going to be a one, sharp kind of a axe falling on the Pakistani head and suddenly all terrorism disappearing. But what is going to happen is that the stuff which the Pakistanis are being forced to do, it's like what happened with the 1267 committee report. When the 1267 committee report came, there were certain prescriptions which were put on some of these designated individuals. The Pakistanis flouted them blatantly, which brought them into the FATF radar screen, because they were not following any of those things, and that is what has got them into this bind. Now, once they've given FATF commitments and you see terrorism continue to flow, and these things don't remain hidden forever. So you will get to know that monies are being transferred, laundering is taking place, terror finance is taking place, how is a particular terror infrastructure surviving, how it is running. Then you bring those things up, and the next time around, the hole which Pakistan keeps digging for itself becomes a little deeper. So I think that is the way you need to look at this. So from that point of view, it's not something terribly bad as far as we are concerned, that they are being forced to take certain decisions, bring in certain transparency in their financial dealings and a whole lot of other things. Now, what they've done is they've changed the rules, they've changed the laws, they've done all of that. What they have not done is implemented them on the ground, which is where the FATF is holding their feet to fire. So once they start doing that, you can expect that there will be other stuff which is going to come out. Their ability to maneuver, to organize finances for these groups, to do many things which they do with these groups is going to get that much more constrained. And that is something we need to keep a lookout for. That is something which our intelligence agencies need to be watching out, keep a hawk eye out for. And then collect all the necessary evidence and take Pakistan to the cleaners the next time around.
Now, there is a criticism that we are too focused on this whole thing of terrorism, and the arguments that we keep coming up with every year, kind of, they've been around for years. Are we going over the top here? Should we pull back a bit? What is it?
No, I think it's one of the core issues as far as India is concerned. It's something on which thousands and thousands of crores are spent every year to ensure that terror attacks don't take place, to ensure that your security structures work properly, to preempt and prevent terrorism from happening in this country. To say that we are focusing too much on it, in a sense, yes, because while terrorism is a very potent threat, it's a very real and clear present danger. But there are other larger strategic threats also, which at least in the sense of a public discourse, tend to get brushed under the carpet. So for example, what is going to happen in the Indo-Pacific, what is going to happen on India's relations with China, what are India's interests in West Asia. Everything kind of tends to get blurred when the whole issue of terrorism comes. But look, I would imagine, at least I would hope, that is what happens when people like you, me and Parul talk. That's not what happens when Narendra Modi, Jaishankar, Ajit Doval and Amit Shah talk, or Rajnath Singh talk. Perhaps at that point of time or at that level, they are also taking cognizance of the larger strategic threats and challenges which face India. So I think you need to look at it in that context.
Sushant, I also wanted to ask you for your comments on the American reaction to Hafiz Saeed's conviction. Alice Wells has tweeted, she said that it's a way forward, it's a step forward rather. And
Parul, this is the kind of nonsense, right from 9/11.
Yes.
This is the the Americans think. I don't know whether they. I don't think they're naive, but I can't see any sense in what they do. So what I mean is that since 9/11, the American line has been that we shouldn't push the Pakistanis too hard. We should keep encouraging them to do the right thing, etc., etc. To me, that smacks of naivety, but not to the Americans, of course, but which is why they've got led up the garden path time and time again. So look at what the trajectory of how things used to happen since 9/11. Every time an American visit was taking place to Pakistan, or a top Pakistani official, Musharraf or whoever was the prime minister at that point of time, used to travel to the US, there would be an operation, some high value target would be caught. The Pakistanis would say, we are fighting the world's war on terror, etc., etc. And the Americans would be enthused by it. And the Americans would think, yes, the Pakistanis are probably now doing the right thing, right? 3 months later, there would be calls, the Pakistanis need to do more. And then 6 months later, the Pakistanis would bring another rabbit from the hat and present it to the Americans. Now, this nonsense has been going on forever. And for Alice Wells to now say that, this is something nice they have done, they're going down the right track, smacks of that precisely what was happening since 9/11, right? So I'm afraid I don't buy it. Anything which the Pakistanis sell, I would probably put it through at least half a dozen laboratories to check what kind of snake oil they're sending me next time. Because the only thing they sell is snake oil.
But surely the Americans are not so foolish. Obviously, they have some strategy in mind.
Considering that they are the hyperpower of the world, they're the superpower, that is what one would like to imagine. Yes. But look at how it plays out on the ground. Did not the Americans know the games the Pakistanis were playing in Afghanistan? It has been documented time and time again, right? You read those papers, the Afghanistan papers, which have recently been leaked, and the Americans knew everything which was happening. At least they knew substantially what was happening. You look at the reports or the books written by American reporters on the ground who were uncovering it all. So the Americans knew everything, and yet I don't know whether it was obtuseness, it was just plain old-fashioned stupidity that they never did what they had to do. And frankly speaking, to give the devil his due, not until Donald Trump came and behaved like, typical redneck American and issued all sorts of warnings to Pakistanis. Again, he also, like a pendulum goes from one extreme to another. But every time he would issue those warnings, I think some of the stuff which the Pakistanis have now started doing, at least to placate the Americans, is out of that. But has that changed the strategic direction or the strategic calculus of the Pakistanis? I don't think so. So they've been playing these games, they've become very adept at playing these games, but that is what at the end of the day it is. So I'm afraid, and Alice Wells is not somebody who's suddenly dropped in from Africa or some other part of the world into South Asia and doesn't understand what South Asian politics is all about. She's an old South Asia hand. She should know what she's talking about. And why she would issue a certificate like this doesn't make any sense to me.
When we look at Afghanistan, and we look at what the Pakistanis are doing vis-a-vis Hafiz Saeed, perhaps a lot of it is linked to the American goals in Afghanistan. Now, I understand there is an agreement of some kind to be signed later this month, and it could even see US withdrawal from Afghanistan. In that case, what happens thereafter? Because, now whatever leverage...
Surya, see, nobody knows what that agreement is going to be. Nobody knows whether that agreement involves an American withdrawal, a complete American withdrawal, or are the Americans going to be entitled to keep 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 bases? So it's basically everybody's feeling around in the dark and trying to think what in their sense of rationality will the deal entail, right? Now, there are many people who say the Americans are going to sign this deal, pack up their bags and leave and forget that Afghanistan exists. There are many others who are convinced that there is no way that the Americans are going to leave. They've invested too much. Afghanistan is a pivotal place for them. They need to have a base out there, if not one, if not more, at least one. The one place which they're not going to give up is Bagram, all of that. Then there is this whole question of who will fund Afghanistan as a state once the Americans withdraw, right? Once the Americans withdraw, yeah, maybe for a couple of months they'll keep putting in some money, but after that nobody's going to give any money, right? And you have to run that state. How do you run it? The Chinese are not going to give money. The Pakistanis can't run their own state. What will they do to Afghanistan? The Iranians don't have the money. The Russians are not going to put in money. So the money has to come from somewhere. And one speculation is that the bases will be allowed to be kept. It will be part of the deal. The bases will, of course, the Americans will not interfere in what happens internally in Afghanistan, and they will pay, a certain rent or a lease for these bases, maybe for 10 years, 20 years, whatever, and that is what it will be. Now, so we don't know. So it's all, it's all speculation right now. There are some people who believe that, look, if the Americans are going to continue to stay on, it works very well because what it does is that it deprives the Pakistanis of their leverage over the Taliban, right? It will not be that the Americans, once they withdraw, they will have to probably operate through the Pakistanis. This way they operate directly and tie up directly with the Taliban, which actually worries the Pakistanis because then they lose their leverage over the Taliban, which is why they have inserted the Haqqani network into the Taliban ranks. The Haqqanis are the most powerful component of the Taliban. And if the Taliban step out of the Pakistani sphere of influence or try and proclaim independence from the Pakistanis will use the Haqqanis to teach the Taliban a lesson. And, so that's the kind of stuff which is being spoken about. But if the Pakistanis were to start using the Haqqanis, once the American peace plan or the American withdrawal agreement or whatever surrender document, whatever you want to call it, is signed and done, will the Americans continue to have a very benign approach towards the Pakistanis? So we don't know how that's going to work. So, Afghanistan at the worst of times or the best of times is a murky place to deal with, and these are not the best of times, so it's even murkier. So, we don't know how that cookie is going to crumble.
So where does all this leave India, especially where Afghanistan is concerned? Because we've always had this position that anything in Afghanistan has to be Afghan-led, Afghan-owned. And recently there have been reports that I think the Americans wanted India to have some boots on the ground in Afghanistan. But we turned down.
Boots on the ground doesn't make sense for a very simple reason, Parul. You guys have been dealing with this thing. How do your logistics lines run?
Yes.
It's not something which is on your neighborhood that, you can have proper logistic line. How are you going to go through Pakistan? Are you going to go through Central Asia? Are you going to go through Iran? Given the kind of relationship the Iranians have with the Americans and all the other mess which is there in the Middle East, can you do that? The Iranians, even in the best of times in the 90s when we were working together to provision the Northern Alliance, the Iranians used to, put a lot of obstacles in the path. What would they be doing now? So putting boots on the ground doesn't make any sense. Anybody who talks about it has never seen a map or never understood how a map operates, never understood how logistics lines of armed forces run. Look at the kind of leverage that the Pakistanis exercise on the Americans simply because of the logistics lines which they give to the Americans. So that's boots on the ground is out. On the rest, look, diplomats have this thing of mouthing certain pithy statements like Afghan owned. What the hell does that mean?
Politically correct statements.
But what does it mean in real terms? Now, the Taliban are supposed to be Afghans. They are leading the war and they're leading the peace talk. So is that an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned thing? Are we saying, or should we then be more precise and say Afghan government-led, Afghan government-owned? We have not said that so far. I haven't seen that. So, you can cut this thing the way you want to cut it. But at the end of the day, no matter what we say, Afghanistan, what is going to happen in Afghanistan, we neither can bring peace to Afghanistan, nor can we ensure that the war continues in Afghanistan. So in some ways, we have to take a bit of a backseat to see how that plays. There could be a time when all our opportunities and all doors shut on us, and then there will be a time when all doors open on us. And you look at the last 50 years, it's happened so many times in the past. And every time the door opens, every time the Pakistanis overplay their hand, somebody opens a door to India. That's the logic of the situation. So I think we should bide our time. We should not, we should behave like a confident power. We should behave like a self-assured power. We should learn to take minor setbacks and look at the larger picture. We should understand, show strategic patience that, okay, just because we are out for 1, 2, 3 years,
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that you're completely out of the picture. That just means that you're sitting on the benches, you're watching the play, and this moment somebody gets a red card or somebody gets disqualified, you enter, That's what we're going to do. That's what we did last time. That's what we are going to do the next time.
Sushant, on Hafiz Saeed, you've also written about it, in fact, that it's a charade. His arrests, his detentions is often kept in government guest houses or in the jail superintendent's residence, if I'm not mistaken. So, given all this, do you think that Hafiz Saeed is actually going to spend 11.5 years in prison, or is going to be out soon
Parul,
on bail?
The judgment which has been announced is in 2 cases. And it's going to run concurrently, which means that it's 5.5. Now, remember that he was arrested last year in July. And the judgment mentions that whatever time he has spent in prison, that'll be set off against his prison term. So 6 months, 7, 8 months is already gone. Plus, given his age and good behavior, he will get remission, right? So let us imagine that it will be about a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years at best that he's supposed to spend in jail. Now, couple of scenarios unfold. One, that Hafiz Saeed is a loyal and patriotic Pakistani citizen, right? So as a loyal and patriotic Pakistani citizen, he'll be called upon to make a sacrifice for the betterment of the country, which is caught in a terrible bind. And he will be told, you stay in the jail for a couple of years. We will make sure all comforts are given. You will have conjugal rights, everything else. And all your 5 or 6 or 10 wives will be allowed in. All of that nonsense will happen. All your little babies will be allowed to, move around with you. You'll be allowed to run your network. You'll be allowed to do everything, but you stay out here. That is one possibility. The second is that they might say, okay, you appeal. We'll use the judges and the judiciary to shield you because there are a number of loopholes in this particular judgment, and the High Court is going to strike it down so that you appeal and we'll take it up from there. But I suspect that that's not likely to happen immediately, because if after the plenary is over, like I said, that the main decision is likely to be taken in October. If in the meantime he is given bail, or his sentencing is set aside or a retrial is ordered, then Pakistan has a tough time explaining itself. They'll of course say that it was the courts which did it, we haven't done it, but I don't think it's going to be that easy for the others to swallow it, given the previous track record of how the Pakistanis have behaved. So I suspect that they will wait until October. The appeal will of course be filed. The hearings will go on. The courts in Pakistan will delay it by 1 month. So all those hearings will go on. He'll be kept in comfort. And then after the FATF meeting in October, probably at that point of time, he'll probably get bail at that time. So that's the second possibility. The third possibility is that he is told that, okay, fine, we'll keep you in comfort, but now since you are damaged goods, we don't want you to be associated with any of the networks anymore. So you've done your service to Pakistan, you've rendered yeoman service to Pakistan, and you are the greatest citizen we have ever had. But now you please take it easy, and we'll get somebody else who's not known in the rest of the world, who's not as notorious as you are. And then we will completely revamp this entire network, and we will give it a new brand name, and we will operate these guys. And the fourth possibility, which I doubt very much, is that he's thrown under the bus. Because he's damaged goods, because throwing him under the bus gets Pakistan a lot more than keeping him, safe. And they might do that. But why I say that's extremely unlikely is because we have seen absolutely no sign whatsoever that they are dismantling any of these networks. So I don't think that's going to happen. Most likely it will be given bail after about 6 months, by about October or something. at that point of time. They'll drag this case, keep him in jail for now, unless, of course, they really want to, test everybody's patience. And just after this plenary, he files the appeal, and then, within a couple of weeks, he's released, much before October. I don't entirely rule it out, but I would be a little surprised if that was going to happen.
On that note, Sushant, thanks very much. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah, you too.